This is Mac OS Ken.
One analyst sees Apple with a $4 trillion valuation. iPhone City is staffing up and poking through a few Apple Vision Pro stories. It is Thursday, the 29th of June, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by BetterHelp. Online therapy. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/macOSKen. This show is also sponsored by Issue, the all-in-one platform to create and distribute beautiful digital content. Creating once and sharing everywhere is pretty easy with a podcast. Sound sounds the same through all sorts of channels with no real changes required. Visual media is different. You might want your stuff on a website, on Instagram, in an email to clients. That can mean lots of formatting, reformatting, resizing, uploading, re-uploading. Could be lots of work, or you could use Issue. Whether you're working on your own, with a partner, or with a team, you can create and share engaging content that stands out in a matter of minutes. Not that you're reinventing the wheel. Issue works seamlessly with the tools you're probably already using, like Canva, Dropbox, and InDesign. With Issue, you can create once and share everywhere. Get started with Issue today for free, or sign up for an annual premium account and get 50% off when you go to issue.com/podcast and use promo code MacOSKen. That's ISSUU.com/podcast and use promo code MacOSKen at checkout for your free starter account or 50% off an annual premium account. That's issue.com/podcast with promo code MacOSKen. As Apple homes in on a $3 trillion valuation, yesterday's close brought it to $2.977 trillion. Do I hear four? I do, from Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives. On Wednesday, Apple 3.0 ran part of a note he wrote. Yes, he's heard what rough times these are for makers of consumer electronics. He just doesn't think that includes Apple. Quoting his note, in our opinion, the street has severely underestimated the massive installed base upgrade opportunity around iPhone 14, and now a mini supercycle iPhone 15 ahead, with roughly 25% of Apple's golden customer base not upgrading their iPhones in over 4 years. I know, he keeps saying the same thing. But it's kind of a forever thing, isn't it? I mean, until something like AR glasses replace smartphones. But I digress. It's not just iPhone sales that have the analyst excited. In fact, most of the post is dedicated to Apple's annual services revenue. He and his think that'll hit $100 billion in fiscal year 2024. Ives calls that a jaw-dropping trajectory versus the roughly $50 billion plus of services revenue that Apple was delivering in fiscal year 20. And it only gets better with Apple Vision Pro. He said it before, and he says it again in this week's note. While the Vision Pro product cycle launch took the headlines at WWDC earlier this month at Apple Park, we believe the bigger story is around essentially a new app store that will be built around this new form factor, with the Apple developer moat a massive advantage in this tech battle for developers. Hardware plus services equals big money, provided they hit no whammies. Ives says his firm believes Apple's fair valuation could be in the $3.5 trillion range, with a bull case $4 trillion valuation by fiscal year 25, which is like a year and a half from now. Mr. Ives has an outperform rating on Apple shares. His price target on the shares is $220. Now, I'm not going to do the Palmer Luckey story yet, but given the Ives note, I have to tell you one thing that he said. Palmer Luckey, the guy who invented Oculus, In an interview I'll tell you about in a bit, Luckey said before VR can become something that everyone can afford, it must become something that everybody wants. And I think that's the approach Apple is taking. Kind of blew my mind when I read that, but we'll come back to it. If iPhone 15 is going to produce a mini supercycle, as Ives says, Apple's going to need phones to power it. To that end, a piece from the South China Morning Post says Foxconn's iPhone City plant in Zhengzhou, China, is hiring up. According to the report, Foxconn's Zhengzhou plant is offering a bonus of 8,000 yuan, just a little over $1,100 US, for former employees who return regularly to the assembly line for peak seasons, according to a job posting on Monday by the company's Product Enclosure Business Group, which is responsible for producing mechanical parts for iPhone. Hey, remember 9 months ago when COVID was once again tearing through iPhone City and people were rioting to get out, then getting rehired, then being asked to leave because they were rioting again because the pay that they were promised wasn't the pay that they were actually paid? It's been 9 months. While returning workers might be preferred, Foxconn is cool with noobs as well. The contract manufacturer is offering a 1,000 yuan or $138 US reward to staff for each new worker that they successfully recommend. Those new workers can also get a one-off 7,000 yuan bonus, just under $970 US, if they are hired under referral during the peak season and stay for at least 4 months. All of this for an hourly rate of 21.5 yuan, which my currency converter says is just under $3 an hour. As for what they'll be making, iPhone 15 Pros and lots of them. A piece from 9 to 5 Mac on Foxconn's hiring spree cites a display supply chain report that says orders for iPhone 15 panels this month are twice what Apple ordered for iPhone 14 this time last year. The piece says the company is expected to skew toward the Pro end, having been surprised last year by demand for iPhone 14 Pro. As foretold in prophecy of old, Apple's public testers got new stuff to test on Wednesday. And new-ish. Mac Rumors ran a couple of reports, one saying the fourth public betas of iOS and iPadOS 16.6 were out to the public testing crew, with another saying the same for the fourth public beta of macOS Ventura 13.5. If you're in the testing program, you likely know how to get what needs to get got. If you're not and don't, but wish you were and did, cast your eyes webward to Apple's public testing program at beta.apple.com. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Online therapy. Life is a highway, says the song. You can go fast, but do you know which direction you're headed in? Whether you're taking your life in a new direction or keeping on the road you're on, having a map and somebody to ride alongside can help. That's BetterHelp and your BetterHelp therapist. BetterHelp takes away the tough parts of finding and going to therapy. Since the whole thing happens online, you're not finding or going anywhere. You fill out a brief questionnaire, and BetterHelp works to find a licensed therapist who's right for you. You meet with them through your phone, your computer, your tablet. And if the match ends up not being great, you can switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. I did have that happen one time. Switching was really easy, and I ended up with a much better match for me. Life is a highway. Where do you want it to take you? Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/macOSKen today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com/macOSKen. betterhelp.com/macOSKen. I remember Matt Cast Adam Christensen saying several years ago that early adopters of Apple gear are basically paying a premium to test future Apple products. Folks who buy first-round hardware pay a virtual ton to test the first round and fund the better, less expensive second and third round devices that will inevitably come. It's one of the reasons I don't put too much stock into what various articles say Apple Vision Pro will and won't do. I can't imagine how different whatever Apple's headset evolves into is going to look like in 5 years, though I do imagine it's going to look quite different. It'll also function differently. It has to. Think of how hobbled the first iPhone was compared to the iPhone 14 Pro, the first iPad compared to iPad Air. 1984 may have changed everything, but you would feel like you were using an abacus if you had to go back to that Mac. Finally, the software on which a lot of today's Vision Pro articles are based is Beta 1 developer software. We don't know that it's going to change a lot between now and the device's release months from now, but we don't know that it's not either. So, a piece from my download blog says Vision Pro may stop working entirely when moving too fast, and that's fine. The way it looks to the site now, Apple's mixed reality headset has a speed limit to prevent car or train usage. It automatically hides VR content until you return to a safe speed, according to the report. I will say I kind of get that for the car, but trains are like planes. Will we really not be able to slap on a Vision Pro and ignore the world passing slowly beneath the rails outside? The way it looks now, planes are cool, but trains and automobiles are off the table, so says iDownload blog. Along a similar safety line, a piece from 9 to 5 Mac says the Cupertino company has limited a Vision Pro safe area to 10 feet by 10 feet when using fully immersive VR experiences. Now, this one is actually documented. According to Apple, when you start a fully immersive experience, Vision OS defines a system boundary that extends 1.5 meters from the initial position of the person's head. If their head moves outside of that zone, the system automatically stops the immersive experience and turns on the external video again. This feature is an assistant to help prevent someone from colliding with objects. Since the movement can be 1.5 meters or 5 feet in any direction, 9 to 5 Mac says that effectively means you are constrained within a 10-foot by 10-foot box. Speculation is all over the map on this. Some say Apple's playing it safe and may increase the traversable area after people get used to the thing. Others say derisively that Apple VR is for couch potatoes. They probably meant couch. Worth remembering. Apple CEO Tim Cook waxes rhapsodic about augmented reality, not virtual reality. These may be the limits forever and ever, amen, since VR isn't what Apple was building. It's also worth remembering, though, it is Beta 1 developer software for a first-generation device. Give it a minute. While Apple seems more enamored with AR than VR, the midwife of VR, father of VR, I don't know, what do you call Palmer Luckey? To my way of thinking, Jaron Lanier was, is, and always will be the father of virtual reality. He invented it. He called it virtual reality. I saw him give a talk about it in the very early 1990s that blew my freaking mind, but he never brought it to market, and Palmer Luckey did. So what? Lanier is godfather and Palmer Luckey is father? Lanier is father and Luckey is midwife or stepfather maybe? Yeah, currently Luckey is the other expert on headsets. And yes, I am making Apple an expert. He may also be the expert on VR today. And he is so into Apple's mostly AR headset. The site Mixed Reality News has written up an interview Peter Diamandis conducted with Oculus founder Palmer Luckey. For starters, Luckey agrees with Apple's decision to go with an external battery pack rather than trying to pack the battery into the headset. Quoting Mr. Luckey, "The fact that Apple did that was something I was afraid they wouldn't do because it does look less cool than having it all kind of on a magical thing that you just put on your head. But getting the weight off your head is so important, especially for the future." While he believes Apple could have found a way to make it work, he thinks Apple will stick with an external battery pack so that it can keep adding to the headset itself. More radios, more processing, stuff like that. At the same time, they will be able to add power to the battery pack. As for the cost, this is something Luckey has had years to consider. Quoting the interview again, "When Apple launched the Vision Pro, I retweeted a tweet of my own from 2015 where I said that before VR can become something that everyone can afford, it must become something that everybody wants, and I think that's the approach Apple is taking." You know, he could be VR's eccentric rich uncle. Then again, so could Lanier. Interested parties can catch the full Luckey interview on YouTube. And finally today, they're not grave robbers, but they're not far removed, and they have been caught by AirTag. Apple Insider highlights a report from the site Click2 Houston. That report had a guy who kept buying memorial vases for his uncle's grave, kept buying them because they kept getting stolen. The problem is, well, a problem is, there are at least a couple in this story. One, stealing things from a gravesite is disrespectful, and two, these vases are expensive. The report says the bronze vases retail for around $600 each. But the nephew of the deceased decided to try one more time with a mod. He dropped an AirTag in the vase in case the gravesite robbers struck again. And they did. Apple Insider says the guy called the cops and gave them the AirTag's location. Police located the thieves, the vase, and dozens more just like it. Local authorities arrested the suspects, who the piece says are accused of stealing 102 vases over the past 2 months. New, that is over $60,000 worth of vases. Of course, the bad guys weren't eyeing retail price. The plan was to sell the metal for scrap. Indications are that the miscreants actually tried to sell them, though the scrapyard they visited turned them down. They are now charged with third-degree felony theft, according to the report. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Issue. Get 50% off an annual premium account with code macOSKen at issue.com/podcast. This show is also sponsored by BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.